Hereditary unfolds as a deeply unsettling psychological horror story that explores grief, family trauma, and the terrifying possibility that some legacies cannot be escaped. The story begins with a family quietly mourning the death of their secretive grandmother. Although her passing brings sadness, it also creates an atmosphere of uneasy relief, as the family's relationship with her had always been distant and complicated. Annie, her daughter, struggles with mixed emotions while preparing for the funeral, aware that her mother had always kept parts of her life hidden behind a mysterious and controlling personality. Annie is an artist who creates intricate, miniature models that replicate moments from her life with haunting precision. Through her work, she seems to process the emotional experiences that shape her family's story. Her husband Steve tries to maintain a sense of calm and stability within the household, offering support while quietly worrying about the emotional pressure Annie carries. Their son Peter is a teenager trying to navigate ordinary life while feeling the tension that hangs over the family. Their younger daughter Charlie is quiet, withdrawn, and deeply unusual in ways that make her seem separate from the rest of the world. Charlie has always been different. She spends most of her time building strange handmade objects and observing her surroundings with an almost eerie detachment. Her behavior suggests that she understands things others cannot see. Even within the family, she appears isolated, as though she exists slightly outside the emotional connections binding everyone else together. Annie sometimes reveals that her mother had a particularly strong attachment to Charlie, a detail that begins to feel more disturbing as events unfold. After the grandmother's death, Annie begins experiencing strange moments that suggest her mother's influence may not have disappeared. The house feels heavier with silence, and subtle occurrences begin to disrupt the fragile peace the family tries to maintain. At first, these moments seem small and easily dismissed as grief or imagination, but gradually they grow more intense, creating the sense that something unseen is slowly tightening its grip around the household. Peter struggles with the pressure of being a teenager under constant scrutiny. Like many young people, he wants independence and the freedom to escape the emotional weight of family expectations. His relationship with Annie becomes strained as they argue about responsibility and maturity. Annie, already dealing with grief and buried trauma from her childhood, finds it difficult to maintain patience when she feels her family slipping further away from her control. The tension inside the house grows stronger when a tragic event occurs that shatters the family completely. A sudden and horrifying accident leaves them overwhelmed with shock and guilt. The loss that follows creates a devastating emotional fracture between Annie and Peter. Each of them silently blames the other in different ways, even though neither can fully confront the pain they are feeling. Steve tries desperately to hold the family together, but grief transforms the house into a place filled with anger, silence, and unbearable memories. In the aftermath of this tragedy, Annie begins attending a support group where she finally speaks openly about her past. During one of these meetings, she reveals disturbing details about her family history. Mental illness, strange behaviors, and unexplained tragedies had long been part of her mother's side of the family. For years, Annie tried to distance herself from that legacy, fearing that the darkness she witnessed growing up might someday return. Through the support group, Annie meets a woman who appears compassionate and understanding. This new acquaintance offers Annie comfort during one of the most painful periods of her life. She introduces Annie to unusual spiritual practices that promise the possibility of reconnecting with loved ones who have passed away. Desperate for relief from grief and guilt, Annie becomes curious about the idea that death might not truly separate people forever. The introduction of these spiritual rituals begins to change the atmosphere of the story. What initially appears to be an attempt at emotional healing gradually reveals darker implications. Annie becomes convinced that she can communicate with the spirit of the child she lost. The experience fills her with both hope and fear, as strange supernatural signs begin appearing within the house. Peter, meanwhile, is struggling with his own psychological collapse. The trauma of the accident haunts him constantly, appearing in nightmares and moments of waking confusion. He feels watched, judged, and somehow connected to the strange occurrences affecting the house. His sense of reality begins to blur as the tension between him and his mother grows more intense. As the supernatural events escalate, Annie starts uncovering disturbing clues about her mother's secret life. Hidden photographs, strange symbols, and mysterious books reveal that the grandmother had been involved in rituals connected to something far older and darker than Annie ever imagined. These discoveries suggest that the family may have been unknowingly entangled in a dangerous spiritual legacy for generations. The realization that her mother might have been manipulating events from the beginning sends Annie into a state of panic. She begins questioning whether the tragedies affecting her family were truly accidents or part of a carefully orchestrated plan. The idea that her children might have been placed in danger by forces beyond her control becomes almost impossible for her to accept. Steve initially tries to dismiss Annie's fears as the result of overwhelming grief and stress. He wants to believe that everything happening in the house can be explained logically. But the strange events continue intensifying until even he can no longer ignore the terrifying possibility that something supernatural is unfolding. Around them, the story builds toward a series of disturbing revelations that expose the true purpose behind the grandmother's secret activities. Annie learns that her family may have been chosen as vessels for a powerful spiritual entity connected to ancient occult beliefs. The rituals performed by her mother were not random acts of obsession, but part of a long and deliberate process, designed to bring that entity into the world. As this truth begins to emerge, the house becomes a place of overwhelming horror. The line between the physical world and the supernatural realm dissolves as Peter experiences terrifying visions and Annie's behavior becomes increasingly desperate and unpredictable. The family is no longer simply dealing with grief or trauma. They are trapped inside a nightmare that has been unfolding long before they understood its existence. Peter finds himself at the center of this terrifying destiny. Strange figures appear in the shadows, watching silently as events move closer to their final stage. The presence that has been influencing the family slowly reveals itself through disturbing manifestations that challenge everything Peter thought was real. The final portion of the story transforms into a relentless descent into terror. Annie's search for answers pushes her beyond the limits of reason as she tries to stop the forces threatening to consume her family. But the deeper she investigates, the clearer it becomes that the plan surrounding them has been developing for years, leaving little chance of escape. The film's climax reveals the horrifying truth behind the grandmother's legacy and the rituals she secretly orchestrated. What seemed like a series of tragic accidents now appears as part of a carefully designed path leading toward a specific outcome. The supernatural forces connected to the family's history finally reveal their purpose in a chilling and unforgettable sequence. Hereditary ultimately becomes more than just a horror story about ghosts or supernatural entities. It transforms into a disturbing exploration of generational trauma, inherited pain, and the terrifying idea that some destinies are shaped long before we understand them. The film suggests that families often carry invisible burdens passed down through time, shaping lives in ways that cannot easily be escaped. Through its slow-building tension and emotionally devastating story, the narrative forces viewers to confront the frightening possibility that the greatest horrors may not come from outside forces alone, but from the hidden histories and secrets buried within our own families. The darkness haunting Annie and Peter is not just supernatural. It is deeply connected to the legacy of choices made long before they were born. By the time the story reaches its conclusion, the audience is left with a haunting reflection on fate, control, and the fragile illusion that people can fully escape the past. Hereditary leaves behind an atmosphere of lingering dread, reminding viewers that some legacies are not meant to be broken and that the shadows of family history can stretch far beyond the boundaries of a single lifetime.